Hello and welcome to another episode of Automate Office Work. I'm your host, Justin. Today's topic is all about design, and we have a special guest, Peter Hornsby. Peter Hornsby is not a lawyer. And I say that in jest because Peter told me that's how he's always introduced to everybody. So I thought I'd do it back at you, Peter. Would you like to introduce yourself, I guess, more fully?
Sure.
Okay.
So my background, I've been working in design for 20 years. Academically, I started out in human factors, and I did computer science, doing research into what's now called low code or no code software. It's come on in leaps and bounds since I was working on it, thank God. But we're talking 20, as I 20, 25 years ago now for that. Um, as a UXer, I've done pretty much everything in UX research, design, testing, lots of copy, um, and I've worked in defence, fintech, um, a few other sort of smaller fields. But my specialty, if you like, has always been tackling the hard problems. Where's the design challenge? How can we make this hard thing straightforward for people to do? Um, and that's kind of grounded in my human factors work. But I've always worked very closely with developers, again with a computer science sort of hat on. And then since about 20, I think it was 2020, 2021, I was put in touch with a legal designer, one of the sort of OGs in the field, Stefania Passera, and that sort of started my kind of contact with the legal world. Since then, I've worked on lots of contracts, T's and C's, privacy policies, EULAs, those sorts of legal documents. Um, Hopefully, transforming them from something that only a lawyer can understand to something that hopefully anybody can understand. And a lot of the kind of key benefit of that, I think, is not just in the we say understanding like it's a fairly trivial thing. It's not. What it means is that you get to closing the deal quicker. It means that when you're maintaining and reusing the document, that job becomes much quicker. So there's that initial investment in writing better, designing better at the outset, and then all the downstream tasks then become much easier. And I guess through that work, I've also been involved with various sort of legal tech companies, just really sort of advising and supporting them on the UX side. So yeah, I play with computers is sort of how I explain what I do to my parents. But yes, I'm just having fun finding problems and trying to fix stuff and improve it.
That's exciting. Yeah, as I was thinking about preparing for this conversation, I was thinking like, what does design actually mean for me? And in a way, isn't actually everything designed? It's just a question of was it designed intentionally
Yeah,
and designed for whom? Like the legal industry has obviously been designed over hundreds of years, and now it's like it's been designed for a different time when there was this like secret group of people who alone could understand the secret writings, right? And that's just not the world that we live in now. So it's like we need to redesign it.
yeah. I mean, if Harry Potter has taught me anything, it's that using Latin in the wrong place causes magic to happen, and that's a bad thing. Um, you talk about how design. I'm sort of paraphrasing you a little bit here, but um, people do things, and when we design things, we do things with intention, and it's kind of the difference. That we sort of unpack that a little bit, and it's kind of I'm solving a problem for me when I understand what my needs are, to I'm solving a problem for a group of people. Well, if we do that, then we need to understand how are these people different from me, and this is one of the areas where I. I suppose I'm a little bit awkward in that people talk in the legal design sphere a lot about design thinking, and I've never been a huge fan of the term design thinking. Partly because the terminology we're using, we're talking about empathy, for instance, and empathy for me is that sort of warm, special, huggy feeling we get, and I'm sort of more well, no, it's research. We sit down and we try and objectively understand things here. So that's kind of one of the things. So it's understanding when we're designing who we're designing for, what their needs are, and needs as ideally distinct from wants. because when you talk to people about needs, a lot of the time what you get is wants. Sometimes, and this is something which I think I struggled with early on in my career. I talk to somebody and they give me a design. They give me a back of the envelope thing. They'd sketch. Hey, go do this for me. Make this look nice. And the whole look nice thing is a separate story. Every designer's had this issue, but I'm sort of more relaxed about that now, in the sense that I understand that it's someone sorting through this bundle of stuff, this horrible Gordian knot in their brain somewhere, that is all the stuff they understand about this thing, and trying to get it into some kind of shape. So I still see now companies jumping to code, or jumping to really kind of high fidelity implementations and designs, and I kind of want to ask them to take a step back and say, okay, let's make sure we really understand the problem. Let's write it down, because when you write it down, you're having to kind of codify all this stuff in your head, and there'll be gaps, and that's fine, because once we get the gaps out there, then we can do something about them. But it's when we kind of jump ahead to that stage of implementing the thing that we've spent the money. It's an expensive process, both in time and usually in developer costs. And I want to kind of just map out this stuff. So I want to try and understand what are the assumptions that I've got about this, who's going to be using it, what are their requirements, and then how does that look as a process? Because when we're designing a process, you don't want, let's take a simple, web form. Have you got a really long form? Have you got multiple pages? How are we grouping information together? Well, we want to group like with like, and we want to ask a question if we need to ask the question. And there might be dependencies there, and we might be able to kind of push people in the right direction and say, this thing's not for you, or have you thought about these things instead? These are all the kind of things that we want to be doing, and we do that by being explicit and opening up the process so we can actually understand it. And I think that's kind of what it boils down to for me. It's that level of understanding. I once had a good conversation with somebody about the difference between knowing something and understanding it. When you know something, I feel there's probably irony in me talking about academic knowledge here. It's almost academic. I am aware that this thing happens. If you understand something, it's a deep level of understanding, and it's almost visceral. There's kind of an emotional thing that goes on about, yeah, I get this, and I can model in my brain what's going to happen if this person is exposed to these sorts of situations. So yeah, that's sort of useful, I guess, thinking tools. And for me, it's the process and getting that clear.
But you really have to know it then, if you're going to design for it.
Yeah.
You can't just jump straight to the implementation, is what I'm hearing. You need to go to like the underlying, like what I saw when I first started getting involved in these kinds of projects. There's like all these different kinds of ways that IT is now working about project management, and one of the things that they talk about is mapping out the process. But users, when they're describing their process, they want to say like, oh, I receive an email from the system. And the IT person that I heard, they said, no. We're not talking on terms of that level. Instead, say, I need to receive a notification from the system. Now, when we're now designing the system, how does the user receive that notification? It can be in any kind of a way, right? We're not constrained just to using email.
If I would say that if that's the language that makes sense to your user, it's kind of okay. Ideally, yes, you want to be understanding what needs to take place. You want to be understanding that swim lane diagram or whatever that says, this is our North Star. This is the goal that we have. And in order to get there, what happens first is this information is passed from this person to this person who acts on it is in this way. The system does something else. The person does something else, and so on. But yeah, sometimes the user can only express it in the way it's happening now, and then we can kind of start to unpick that a little bit. And that's part of the skill of doing effective user research. it's that process of taking what the user's saying and just kind of asking the right questions so you can kind of unpick this little knot and kind of get from this horrible fur ball of stuff to something that's more of a straight line of this is what is happening now, this is what needs to happen, these are the information exchanges that go on in what we're looking at here.
I heard you talk just a little bit about how people want to go to like doing these surface level kinds of things, like the interaction and the experience of like, oh, it's really beautiful and pretty.
Yes.
And it sounds to me
Yeah.
like that's not actually enough. Yes, this is important, but there also needs to be like a substance layer behind this as well. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that?
So visual, the sort of visual side of things, stuff that is beautiful. I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone talk about the beauty of something where there's not also an actual solid piece of design helping them to achieve a goal, kind of underpinning that. So the visual side can make something that works well better, but I don't know what sort of the language I can use here. You can't polish a turd. You can't put lipstick on a pig. You start with something that's good, and that's where the hard work comes in. That's the, you know, you get that, and getting that level of understanding is important. I'll just take a very brief step back, if I may, Justin,
Okay.
because you said about jumping straight to the implementation. I mean, there are instances where you can, but I would say those instances are pretty rare. They're not for kind of enterprise scale stuff. It's kind of this is what I'm trying to do. I can probably do it in a Word macro. I can probably do it in an Excel spreadsheet that I've chucked some formulas in. If the investment to get a result, typically for one person or a very small group of people, is really low, fill your boots.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you go ahead and you do that. But once you start ramping up the number of people involved, the variety of people involved, people with different backgrounds who want different things from the process, and the complexity of the thing you're trying to achieve, that's you really need to start, putting the effort in on the design side. If you think back to, I mean, I'm old, and this was around, when I was about 3 or 4, I think. If you think back, like the Altair computer, the one that Bill Gates and
Wow.
Paul Allen kind of designed the first BASIC for. You had these hobbyists in the States, and they were there, and they had this little blue box, and they were flicking switches on the front to program the damn thing. And they bought it, and the thing sold in certainly hundreds of thousands, if not millions, because they really wanted this thing that did really cool stuff. And it was a horrible user experience by any metric, but they were sufficiently motivated to want to play with it. But yeah, really, really niche audience, but they still went through that pain. Now there's a thing called Jakob's law, which is that most people's expectations of user experiences are set by what they experience everywhere else. So your internal company software, the expectations are partly set by what Amazon's doing, what Google's doing, what Apple's doing, what all these systems that people use day in, day out are doing. As the quality of those has risen, and as the power of computers has risen, so people's expectations have developed. So they're now kind of, well, yeah, I'm here to do a job. I mean, I guess I'm partly motivated day to day by life is hard. Someone wants to get a job done, and therefore we have almost a moral responsibility to aid them in doing that, putting the effort into design, giving people the better tools, giving the gardener a better spade, giving the cleaner a better mop. These are all things that help achieve the final goal. We are providing a means to an end, and the
This
better we design that, the better tools we put together, the better someone does their job.
this is the purpose of design in my mind. This is the core. This is
Amen.
what design does is it's having an impact on the lives of every normal person. You're empowering them and making it so that they can do things better with purpose. You're I don't know. There's a philosophical part to this that we are taking the individual and taking them to a higher level where maybe they can stop doing the mundane, boring stuff and really help them to have meaning and joy in their work.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm British, so I'm mentally incapable of talking about how passionate I am about something. But if I could, this is what I'd be talking about. You know, this is stuff that matters. Being able to do this.
Wow. And I get the feeling that you really enjoy doing this as an individual. You talked about how this for you is a way of playing. You're playing around with it. You
Yeah,
talked about these hobbyists, how they were playing with the switches. So, in a way, it's also play.
it is. It is. I mean, I when I was at university, I worked quite a lot with physicists and former physicists, and one of them, he wouldn't talk about physics laws. He would talk about them more as guidelines. And the idea was you keep your mind open to, well, that's kind of what we understand now. But if you treat it as an absolute, then maybe you'll miss something. So be aware of it, treat it, kind of a really strong guideline. But law is kind of implies immutable and nothing can ever change it. So be open to that. And I mean, honestly, I treat design laws. I mentioned, Jakob's law earlier. There are rules and principles in design, and it's kind of okay. I'm aware of them. I honestly, I use most of them. I think I hate the word intuitively, but that's kind of I use them because I understand kind of where they come from, and that's kind of the way we work. Um, but I'm also aware that there are probably situations where we want to break them. When we talk about friction in design, for instance, um, most of the time you want to remove friction because you want people to be getting the thing done quickly.
Right.
There are instances where you want to introduce friction because you want to be making that thing just that little bit harder for somebody to do because it's an important thing, because perhaps your underlying system is something that it would be hard to undo. So let's make sure they're aware they're making this decision, and um, you know, so it's a conscious decision. It's
You
not an
said you
option.
worked in defense. So, I
Yes.
imagine that there are hard lines where you want to put friction in place.
Before you launch the nuclear missile, lift the switch, get your mate to turn the key. You got to turn the keys at the same time, guys, before the big thing goes off and sort of drops food parcels somewhere or
Yeah.
whatever's in the missile. We don't know. We don't care.
Yeah.
That's our job. But yeah, you want the serious decision to be taken seriously.
But these are both parts of design. You're making things easier, and some things you want to make harder. Some things you want to completely empower somebody to be able to do it. Other things, like the stupid stuff, you want to make sure they're never able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could see this being applied not just to technology, not just to work, but it has so many different applications to like our daily life. Like, I'm an American. Granted, I haven't lived in America for 14 years now. And I'm seeing that like my democracy is being tested in ways that we never thought imaginable. And now I'm thinking, why didn't they put guardrails in place to stop this kind of crazy stuff from happening? Like, who designed this? Did they do this with intent?
And I think I know very little about this. I am speaking for a little bit of position of ignorance. I think some of that we've seen previously in things like the right to bear arms as part of an organised militia, but militia was never defined. So, what is that? Is a militia one guy or is it lots of people? But I should probably step away from that argument.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of drawing a parallel there between. Yeah, we didn't know that firearms were going to have this incredible power, therefore we couldn't plan for it. But that's partly why. I mean, when you're designing something, there comes a point when you release it out into the big wide world and it's got to fend for its little self.
And there are unintended consequences.
We need to be thinking about this as an ongoing process. This is not, release and we walk away and we do other stuff. We release it and we keep an eye on it. We do our user testing to kind of hopefully get it from being, from kind of it's okay to it's pretty good. But then we monitor it because the world is changing and the technology is changing and expectations are changing, and our product is probably changing if we're doing our job right.
Uh,
So we monitor it, we look at the raw data, we see where people are having problems with it, we see where the misunderstandings are, and we refine what we're doing based on that. But it's kind of, yeah, once you launch the product, that's not it. You put a tick in the box. We need to be understanding how do we monitor these things to stop them biting us on the bottom in 5 years' time.
So I'm hearing design is not a destination necessarily, but it's an ongoing journey.
It's a road, not a destination. Absolutely, yes, yeah. And having the problem is, I think, a lot of the time people like absolutes. And if you know your Star Wars, only a Sith deals in absolutes. Um, it's saying that this is the way the world is in some respect. We have launched the product. Great. We need to do other stuff now. I'm sure there's commercial pressures. I'm sure there's other things you need to be getting on with in your day job, and therefore that's what we'll move on to because we've launched this thing. But yeah, it's not how things are in reality. And I think understanding reality and sort of having that view and being comfortable with, I guess it's a kind of ambiguity, where we say, you know, we know we've done the best job we can with this thing. We're going to make it better down the line. It's not the end. Is something that kind of comes hopefully with experience.
You said you worked with the no code, low code kinds of solutions, and I'm hearing that you like to play with things.
Yes.
I'm also getting the feeling that a lot of design, it's kind of a state of mind. It is the realization that, like, holy cow, I can actually have an impact on my own work. I am not just a cog in a machine anymore that is just like I don't know, I'm going to say the word slave, but I don't mean it as like somebody that's not being paid. I mean somebody who's being told exactly what to do, and you do only that. That world is gone now. People are now empowered. They're able to make decisions and design their work with intent, especially because these companies like Microsoft, they've given us the tools to do it ourselves. You know, an average person now can just open up Microsoft Office and say, how can I make my work better? Aha, I have the tools. I don't need to ask IT anymore. So yeah, there's just this whole world that's open now.
And I think this is just an observation. I have no data to back this up. I think sometimes people need to be aware of that. Some folks will realise it themselves. They will think to themselves, okay, this is the thing that I need to do. This is the current journey to achieve that. Are each of these steps necessary? Do I need to do all of these things? What about this thing? Because I'm sending this thing off. I'll give you an example. I did a contract at a company called Three UK, a UK mobile phone provider, and one of the things I was asked almost on my first day was, they had a website and they had a banner on the website, and I was asked to put together a mock-up of the page showing the where this banner sat on the website. And I said, well, where can it sit on the website? It's at the top, isn't it? They said, yes. I said, and here's the banner. You've got the banner designed, haven't you? They said, yes. I said, well, what value is there in me putting the banner on the website to show you how it's going to look when you can see how the banner looks on its own, and it can only sit in one place on the website? And they said, oh, yeah. And I've got this sort of... I think a lot of people don't think about that. And partly I think that's down to... they're not used to thinking that way, but I think a lot of it is also down to they don't have enough headspace. They don't have enough. Their minds are focused on getting the thing done, and I've got to get this thing done, and I'm busy, and I've got these meetings, and I need to squeeze the work in around that, and I need to get it done. And from some of the conversations I've had with lawyers, I think lawyers are often in that same space, that same mental space, because they've got deadlines. It's important stuff they're doing. They've got to get it done. So this is the way we work. So I'm just going to get it done this way. And they're not necessarily having that headspace, having that time to be able to take a step back and say, actually, what's the end result here? What are we actually doing? And what are the different ways that we could be achieving that same goal, possibly quicker? Because doing that is the investment in the design, in the sense of design as a process, and all the work that kind of goes around that to be able to get to that point. You're going to get to a better point when you put the work in, but that takes work. It takes the work to understand what you're doing now, to understand what the outcomes are, what the touch points are,
Hmm.
to challenge some of those touch points, to be able to say, listen, I'm not going to keep the partner informed for this part of the process. They're going to see it at the end, or whatever that looks like in your organisation. So yeah, there's a need, I think, to give people almost the permission and the space mentally to think about what the process is, what the outcomes are, and to rework that in their own minds.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a kind of a paradox, a difficulty in talking with people about possible designs, and people just don't have the headspace to talk about like these abstract kind of concepts. They really want you to show, well, what will it look like? I need something concrete, you know. I was the kind of a person when I was automating all of my office work, that I was able to speak in terms of abstract kinds of ways. And I went to my boss's boss, who was also kind of a dreamer. So I thought, okay, I can discuss all of my future plans with him. I started telling him about, like, I want to do this and this and this and this. And he goes, time out. Justin, you need to give me the Christmas tree first. Like, you're talking about ornaments where you're going to place the decorations on a tree.
Mm.
I need you to build the tree for me first. Because if
Yeah.
you're just hanging stuff in the air, I have no idea what we're doing. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always a little bit of like concreteness that you have to build with your audience first. Maybe you have to start building the project for, and like you said, sometimes it makes sense to actually just go build the project. Other times we need to completely plan at the beginning.
Yeah.
But for me, for discussion purposes, a lot of times we have to like build at least halfway so that then we can actually discuss, and then the person can actually move these Christmas tree ornaments around.
When we're showing designs to people, one of the bad things that can happen is that they, you've sketched something out on paper or a really rough mock-up, and one of the things that can go wrong is that they look at it. Oh well, I'm sorry, I don't like that color, and you've used this word here, that's completely the wrong word. And I'm sorry, no, you need to go away and completely redo this. And actually, what you came to them looking for was feedback on the process, feedback on the big
The
picture,
substance.
on the substance of it. Um, there was something else that you mentioned there that I just wanted to pick up on. I can't remember what it was. I'll have to come back to it. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you've pointed out though there's a difficulty in speaking with people to get their feedback about the substance.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not equipped to be able to speak on this kind of a level. So what they talk about is the color, the logo, the name of the thing. When for me as a designer, I don't care about those things. I want the actual substance, and get the substance better. It's really bad when you're talking with a group of people about these kinds of issues and you get one person who is the leader, maybe it's like the president or the director. They have to show that they know what they're talking about and that they're in charge.
Yes.
But a lot of times they don't know how the work is getting done. They can't give you feedback. So what they do give feedback on is the color or the name. And there's a Wikipedia article I found. It's called "The Law of Triviality," and it
Yeah.
says in any group discussion, you're gonna, like, 80% of the time is discussion on trivial things that don't matter at all, because it matters to it politically to the people to look good.
Yeah. I would add to that a couple of things. One of them I've always heard it as described as the sort of hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, because of course they're the grand high manager of XYZ. Their opinion must be valid, and even if their perspective is somewhat remote, they're still the one who decides what you get paid next year. Um, I think in terms of chat, there is a lot of there's research been done to suggest that the amount that somebody talks in a meeting correlates with their sort of perceived intelligence. So talking more makes you think that someone's smarter. Um, this is of course nonsense. It's to do with the type of contributions or staying focused on that, and you can do some stuff to manage the discussion and to keep things focused on this is what we're trying to achieve here. I've noticed that organisations in the period that I've been working for, they have drifted away from having meetings with formal agendas and minutes captured at the end, and I think those are really useful tools to help people to stay focused. I think they're probably regarded as quite boring and old fashioned, but I'd rather go into a meeting knowing what it is I'm here for, what the contribution is, and what the outcomes should be. I think Amazon, they were sort of lauded for something that Jeff Bezos introduced, which was writing a brief, writing a few pages of prose to explain something, and the first part of the meeting was you read the document.
Hmm.
I'm a huge, I mean, I like writing anyway, but I'm a huge believer in writing stuff down to be able to both get your own thoughts in order and to be able to express them to other people and to get feedback from other people.
Hmm.
It's a great way of working. Now, I mean, that may help in the situation you describe, but there's always a degree of organizational politics and egos that kind of come into these things. Again, I mean, I found as I've got older, I kind of don't care about a lot of stuff. It's
Uh-huh.
but being able to do that, it, that sounds totally pretentious. It takes a certain degree of maturity in a field.
Hmm.
If you're kind of early on in the field and you're still getting your head around the concepts and still trying to understand what's going on, you haven't got the headspace to say, oh, well, actually, this is just an example. You've got the experience to say, this is an example of a pattern that I've seen before.
Hmm.
Thing comes in here, person does thing, person passes thing on to next person. It then, yeah, you haven't got that headspace.
So I keep hearing you talking about designing our meetings,
Yeah,
designing agendas, and
yeah.
it's all about intent. What do we actually want to get done with this? I'm also hearing you talk about how we enter into a situation and there are assumptions already that we have to deal with preconceptions. So even with a meeting, what does it mean to have a meeting? And you talked about how you learned all of these rules. Maybe they're intuitive, and then you said sometimes you just have to throw out the rules. So I'm hearing this even with meetings. There are assumptions with the meetings. People need to look good. Certain things need to be performed. And now you're saying, let's throw all that out. It's bullcrap.
They are they people behave in a certain way in meetings much of the time. They will talk a lot because they want to be seen as having something to say because I'm here. Why am I here? Well, I must be here because I've got something good to contribute. But I'm looking at this thing. I've got no idea what's going on here. But I can't be seen to be doing that because that's a loss of face in front of the rest of my peers. I better say something. Don't like purple. Can we get rid of the purple? That uh, possibly stream of consciousness. This may be the kind of thing that's going on. In terms of yeah, I think most of the time having more structure in meetings helps to keep the focus. The biggest single issue I think is a loss of focus that is expressed through um, the sorts of behaviours that we've kind of flagged and pulled up as this is not helping us achieve our goal. Well, let's be clear on what our goal is. Let's be clear on what our assumptions are. Now, if I'm designing something, much of the time, what are my sort of standard assumptions? My standard assumptions include things like it's going to be used by men and women. I know that about 10% of men have some form of colour blindness. So that's going to affect the choice of colours I use. I know that a lot of people have some form of dyslexia. That takes different forms, but we can do things about that. Um, Although I know that most people skim things, when they're reading text on screen, which tells me that we need good structure. Where we do use language, we want to be consistent. Why do we want to be consistent? Because we want to minimize the cognitive load. We want to minimize the amount of brain power and headspace that it takes for someone to get something done.
A lot of the users won't be native speakers of English.
Yeah, yeah. And
Make
if we
it
do,
simple with
if,
icons.
if we do stuff that we flag under the banner of accessibility, we're making it more accessible to everybody in general, using colors that a colorblind person can understand, and communicating information not just with colors but with colors and words, or colors and icons. And if we're using icons, let's make sure that they're either widely used, or that we're pairing them with text that explains what they mean. So when we think about usability, we break that down into, is this accessible? Is this learnable? What do we mean by learnable? Well, you've got people who are going to be using the system day in, day out, but you've got the new starter. Does it make sense to design for someone using day in, day out, or the new starter? Well, I would argue it's the new starter, because they have less knowledge that they're bringing along to it. They've never seen this thing before. They're already busy. It's their first day. They're probably doing online training, which is awful. So you've got to do it in a way that helps them to get up to speed, to be productive. It's an investment in the organization. People are expensive. I like people as a general rule. But they're expensive, and so if they're being employed to do a thing, you want to make that thing as straightforward as possible for them.
Yeah. If you want them to do something, make it so they can do it.
Yeah,
It's easy as that.
crazy talk, I know, but hey, it might just catch on.
Yeah, yeah. I learned some lessons about communication. There's like 5 rules of communication. One is know who your audience is, like when you're preparing a communication. The next one is, what is the purpose of your communication? Are you just making them aware, or are you challenging them to go do something? If you're challenging them to go do something, make it so they can go do it, and make it so it's easy and it's recordable. Like if it's a yes or no, whether they did it or not. So there's just these basic things.
But when you say that, I mean, the rules of communication, I don't know the 5 rules, but when you were talking about it, I'm there thinking, okay, so if we want somebody to do something, we need to explain to them in terms that they understand, and we want to make it easy for them to do that, and we want them to know why they're going to do it, and they want some kind of motivation. Well, we'll tell them why they're doing it. We'll tell them why it's important. And I'm sure a lot of people watching, they're thinking, and we're not doing this because, when you state it like that, it's kind of course it's obvious. I don't like the word obvious, but it should be. It should be just common sense and just the way we think. But because it's something people are doing day in, day out, that's not what their brains are kind of catching on to. So they're not really doing all these things.
So yeah, the human brain is naturally, it takes a lot of energy to be doing what we're doing, to be thinking, and so the brain takes a lot of shortcuts to be able to conserve energy.
Yep.
We just don't think. We go into autopilot when we're doing things, and so we're just doing it because that's the way we've always done it. I'm hearing that we need to kind of stop that, and we need to think about with intent what we're doing and why, and all of these things.
Ideally, I mean, if I drive somewhere, I kind of get to the end of my journey, and most of the time I can't remember, unless there's someone who's cut me up in the car or there's been something notable. It's kind of, I've not been thinking about it. I've just been reacting in the moment. I've been trying to anticipate what's going on, but all of that stuff has fallen out of my brain by the time I get to the far end. And designing, when you're designing work for somebody, I think you want to be thinking about, okay, where are the areas where we want them to pay attention, and maybe that's a case for increasing friction. Where's the laborious stuff? I used to talk about UX in terms of, I want the computer to be doing what it's good at. So that's finding known and structured information rapidly. That's doing the same thing repeatedly, really, really quickly. That's taking information and using it in multiple places, possibly in multiple formats, all this kind of stuff. I want the human to be doing what they're good at. And that's, ideally good thinking in a way that helps to identify problems, or that looks for new and better ways of doing things,
Hmm.
or that is looking for anomalies. And we want the two to be working together. So one party, the computer, is presenting information in a way that it makes it easy to spot the anomaly. For instance, there was a display unit, remember years and years ago, where there were sort of normal readings and there were abnormal readings. It could be sort of positive or negative. And the way the designer had done this was they had a series of lines, and I think they structured them either in a box or sort of a septagon. Um, and so whenever the system moved out of alignment, the lines started to separate. They started going like that or like that. Um, and so the user could see that there was this disjoint, that the system, that there's a problem. All right, I better go and have a look at that. Better than had they been looking at, say, digital displays,
Hmm.
where it was just some numbers. Oh, that's 0.3 higher than it should have been. That's not helpful. But if you use these sort of angles, that use this picture to say there's a problem, and then I can drill into that, progressive disclosure. Um, I can drill into that. I can see where the issues, and I can resolve it. So I mean, that to me was a really nice example of design being used effectively to solve a problem, working
Fascinating.
with a human being.
Fascinating. Okay. Perhaps we can. We're gonna be wrapping up in the next 10 minutes. But if we can shift toward the idea of future technologies, people are gonna be wanting to design their processes and their tools just using AI, and I'm hearing that they're gonna have to do it with intent.
Yeah,
I'm imagining you're gonna say you can't just blindly trust it to go. Don't turn off your brain and just expect it to do it. Instead, use these tools in a creative way. Ask it to help you brainstorm new possibilities, and it's not the end of thinking; it's the start of thinking. But there is this threat that people are gonna just start turning off their brains because it's the easier thing to do. And yeah, your thoughts?
I have seen a lot of discussion about people using ChatGPT, other AI technologies, as a replacement for their own brains, which I think is worrying. Um, I'm aware that people spend a lot of time on their phones and on their computers day to day, which I personally find a little bit worrying, um, because for me, my brain, the way I think is what makes me me. And I think the more of that we outsource to people, or we outsource to technology, I do find that worrying. In legal terms, for example, I've heard conversations about, well, we can use ChatGPT as a replacement for junior lawyers for these tasks, but I don't know what work's been done to understand to what extent those admittedly possibly repetitive tasks, a lot of the grind work that goes on, the research work that goes on as a junior lawyer, helps to shape how effective you are as a more senior lawyer, for example. Um, Technology is a tool. Technology is a way of working. AI happens to be one form of technology. I think it is different, and um, in terms of its capability, I think it's a little bit worrying in that regard, because um, I'm seeing it used as a substitute for thought in a lot of cases. Um, what I would like to see more of is people putting the effort into understanding what the problem is. If
Mm-hmm.
you probably know that the whole Douglas Adams answer to life, the universe, and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and the answer is 42. The question is, what do you get if you multiply 6 by 7? No, it's not 6 by 8, 7 by 8. The question didn't meet the answer, I think.
It's
Um,
ridiculous.
and it's kind of okay. That doesn't make, but you've got to know the question. You've got to kind of understand what is it I'm trying to do here, and the
Mm-hmm.
strength of a lot of methods in designing stuff is in saying, let's understand the problem. That's not just saying, I want a word processing system. It's in the detailed requirements that someone's put together and said, this is what it's going to do. and then the designer takes that and says, okay, this is what you want to do. This is how it's going to do that. And then we test it and we try it and we make it better. Um, we can be using AI as I think it was as talk to the duck. Do you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, software engineers explain their problem to a rubber duck because expressing it helps it sort it out in their own brain. Then
It's kind of like writing.
yeah,
You organize your own thoughts, and then you
yeah,
understand the problem, and then you can go further.
and that's great. When you say to AI, build me a system that will do this, it'll do that, but you've not kind of gone through that back and forth that you would with a human or
Yeah.
even with a duck, um, to get that understanding that then helps to inform the design.
Yeah.
So you're then left with this code that it's generated, and then you're going to got to go back, but you can't go and edit the code directly because you're not sure how it works because you're not a coder. Whereas if you had a human being in the loop, you could explain to them, they'll have built it in a way that makes it easy to change because they're an experienced coder. And it's all that kind of stuff that, um, a way to tackle some of the weaknesses um, is to be explicit, is to go through the process, is to call out these assumptions, to really think about, I know I said this is what I want. Is that actually what I want?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there an underlying problem here that's of which this is just a symptom? So yeah, it's I see a lot of excitement around it. I think a lot of it's justified. I also have a worry about what is our very human tendency to take shortcuts. Um, that's the thing that concerns me, and as it's very human because thinking is hard. The brain uses most or the biggest single organ that takes the most of our energy. So yeah, in these evolutionary terms, it's an expensive thing to carry around. But I think for me, it's um, more concerning the idea that we will outsource this thing that makes us fundamentally human to a machine. That's my concern.
So if I take your thoughts and the themes that I've been hearing this whole time, and I push it forward, the theme that I'm hearing from you is that we need to be actively engaged in designing with intent how we are going to be using these tools in the future.
Yes, good summary. Good job.
I love it. There's so many different applications of these
And I,
different
and I,
ideas.
and I know that on the one hand, I'm talking about thinking in that way, actively doing stuff, and I'm also talking about play and just experimenting and trying stuff out. And it's kind of we're being serious, but we're doing a serious thing, but we're doing it with hopefully enough of a sort of light-hearted approach and mindset that we can play, that we can try stuff out, that we can say, hey, maybe this is wrong,
Hmm.
and we're not taking stuff as heavyweight gospel. It's kind of, well, okay, we know this is still our North Star. We know this is what we're trying to achieve. There's different ways of doing that. What if we did this? What if we did that? Try it out, experiment with it, play with it, and it's going to see where we get to.
And that's one of the great uses of AI. You can use it to challenge the assumptions.
Yeah.
Ask the what ifs.
Or ask somebody else that you know. Kick it around with them. Get a fresh idea from them too.
Yeah, yeah. I was hearing that this is what pubs used to be for. Like before social media, people would get together in pubs and just talk about their crazy ideas, and then the guy across from them would say, are you kidding me? That's crazy. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Now, or at least the last 10 years, we've all been funneled into social media where we're in these echo chambers and where you'll say crazy stuff and the other people around you will say, "Oh yeah, you're a genius." That's exact like we could use AI to open that up and just destroy that and get back to like the pub kind of the real life where you have real interactions. Or not. just
If as long as there's beer involved, it's fine. It's all good.
just ask the AI, validate everything that I ever say.
Yeah,
Okay.
tell me that I'm completely right about
We
everything.
are going to be isolated even more. All right. Well, good stuff. Thank you. Is there anything that you want to plug? Do you have a website where people can connect with you? Or
I've been working with a bunch of really smart legal design folks on the Legal Design Sandbox, legaldesignSandbox.com. There's training resources there if people want to learn more about legal design. Or I'm happy to chat to anybody about design. Hit me up, give me a shout.
cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, Peter. And
Thanks.
I wish the audience happy designing.